Yeah, just be like, speak on, and I've been asking everybody I can talk to and having this question, everybody that I know. Like, Deion Sanders had the comments like, "You really need to go after 10 people," like, because when you look at it, after 2 or 3 years, that's all you have left of these recruiting classes. And my kind of thoughts on it are, if you get the quarterback, you get the big defensive end, you get the top five-star, 4-star guys. All of a sudden, all these other guys are ready to come. They're going to come play with those guys. But we
Yes.
keep ending up with the 3 stars with heart and the low 4 stars, and those guys end up leaving us. The solution has been bringing in the coordinators. That's why I'm so dead set on bringing in known quantities at recruiting that can recruit regardless of the record, yada yada. But there's like ethics that goes into it. It feels like we just need Mike to get a little down and dirty and be willing to do that. Go out and do things for the defense as well. So yeah, thoughts on all
Yeah. No, I agree with that. And I think we were talking about this on our show earlier. I think with the coordinators, man, I really want good schemers, right? Because you got to have guys who can maximize that talent. And I mean, you look at say a program like Texas A&M under Jimbo Fisher had the number one most talented roster in the country and couldn't really win a whole lot of games with that roster. So you can get all the talent in the world, but you got to be able to do something with it. And so I would like to see some schemers there. But then I think it's your position coaches as you bring in the new staff. You need to get some dogs on the trail. You have to, because at the end of the day, we all know it's still about the X's and the O's versus the Jimmies and the Joes, and you got to have talent on your roster to win. That's why you look at a team like Clemson, when they have a quote unquote bad year, it's a 9-win season because they are still the talent level that they have relative to the competition they play in the ACC is still very high. Like it's not like the SEC where you have a couple of really top level teams there. They just have enough talent that they can go beat a Wake Forest on a bad day. They can beat a Pitt on a bad day. And so Florida State has to get back to that level. But we also have to remember that Florida State has the 13th most talented roster in the country right now, according to the 247 transfer or talent composite. They're over 50% blue chip ratio. So you have talent on this roster. You're just not getting the most out of it. They're not developing the talent correctly. So I think the staff that you bring in around them is very important. But like you said, George, I think it's really important to really put a focus on high school recruiting, because you got to get guys. There's certain positions that you can get out of the portal that work well, like receiver and DB and things like that. But typically in the trenches, that is built successfully at programs like Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson. That's built through high school recruiting. And that is something that we have not seen happen at Florida State. They have not done that. I had said before that, like, really for me, Florida State is kind of built backwards from a lot of the other dominant programs in college football. We have a lot of talent outside of the line of scrimmage, but then we just get by at the line of scrimmage. Whereas like a Georgia, they are built from the line of scrimmage out. They can go win a national championship with a former walk-on quarterback. You can win a national championship at Alabama with Mac Jones, but we need a Jameis Winston. We need a Jordan Travis to overcome a terrible offensive line. And so, like, really my emphasis this offseason is going to be bring in good coordinators who can maximize that talent, then bring in a lot of the position coaches who can go out and load the roster with talent. And then, I mean, you absolutely have to figure out the trenches, because that is what's killing Florida State this year. The trenches are just, I mean, they're terrible. As well as I do, this is one of the worst offensive lines in the country. And so, I mean, you've made a change at your position coach there, but yeah, you really, really have to fix the trenches before you do anything. And if you do that, I mean, the thing is with Mike Norvell, people talk about this, he's being exposed, but when he was at Memphis, he led that team to a 12-win season in the Cotton Bowl. He led Florida State to 23-4 over 2 years, 19 straight wins in a conference title. There's a lot of really, really good coaches in college football that have never been able to accomplish those feats. And so I still think Mike Norvell knows what he's doing. I think he just got comfortable, where it's like, okay, do I really need to make changes when we're doing as good as we are? And now it's kind of like, man, it's like Warren Buffett always says, the famous quote, you find out who's swimming naked when the tide goes out. Well, the tide went out and he realized he needed to make some changes. And so now he's kind of having, unfortunately, it took a 1-9 season to be able to do this. Hopefully
I
2 and
think
10. Goodness, we can't lose to Charleston Southern.
You brought common sense, and everything you said was 100% correct. But I think what I was kind of pointing out is like, let's do an NFL comparison. Okay. There may be a team that out there is the most talented team, and we see it year in, year out. The Tampa Bay Bucks were like that for a while. Unreal talent, best wide receivers in the league, best linebackers, one of the best defensive linemen, but they don't have a quarterback.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, you could take Tom Brady on a Patriots team that wouldn't win 5 games with any other coach and quarterback combo, and they go win a Super Bowl with a bunch of little white dudes at slot wide receiver and offensive linemen. As soon as they leave there, they never do anything else. And same thing, the Deion Branches of the world. So I guess that's kind of what I'm getting at. Obviously, you need to be well rounded. And I think just as far as D line and offensive linemen, there's such a small number of those that, yeah, and we haven't been getting them. We get
Right.
guards, and we
Yeah.
get skinny defensive ends that would be better in a 3-4. And we try to make them, our power rush ins. And that's how we end up getting pushed back. But yeah, I just think like if you just put Travis Hunter, even with the same offensive line, if you get him in 2021, this team has 4 or 5 more wins just with that one guy. And to your point, the quarterback, I think that's one of the most important things about this whole process. What offensive coordinator they bring in, you got to get a quarterback. You got
Yeah.
to. I saw one of the comments saying like, how do you expect, he's not going to be able to recruit. When we're sitting here talking about recruiting, we're talking about going forward in the 2026 class. Yeah, it's definitely going to be the portal. You're going to have to bring in 30, 40 portal people this offseason to try to get things back to right, get to a bowl game next year. But vis-a-vis after that, that 26 class is going to be the key to Mike Norvell's future. If
Yep.
it's elite at the end of the season and you only got 5, 6, 7 wins, well, that's fine. If you have a guy that you're coming at quarterback that you think is going to change your program, a Jeremiah Smith at wide receiver, a defensive end who's already 6'5", 260 pounds, a 6'8" offensive tackle, not a 6'4.5" guy that you're praying you can, coach up, or a Solomon Thomas who's really an interior guy that you want to make a tackle. A lot of that stuff, we didn't end up, people were pissed when we got Daniel Pierre-Louis, but he's a tackle body. He's like the 30th, 40th tackle in the country. He's not a this or that. It's not necessarily that they have to be a 5-star. We have to get guys that fit the role, that have a chance to build into it. It's like they want to turn water into wine or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's tough. When it comes down to the coordinator roles, are there any names out there? Is there a specific, do you want a head coach that just got fired? Do you want a guy, up and comer, that's a tight ends coach or offensive line coach to get a promotion? Do you bring somebody off the bench like a Dan Mullen or a Jimbo Fisher? Like, there's so many questions out there. I really struggle to believe that Mike's willing to change. And you said it. He's done things that nobody else did, but he's not going to get another 2-3 year run up to get there.
Yeah.
It's just not going to get it.
Yeah, I do think this really is his one chance to do an overhaul, right? I think if this doesn't go right, this is it for him. I think he gets, next year can't look like this year, but as long as he reaches, maybe bowl eligibility, I think he gets 2026, because you don't want to bring in all these new staff members and then give them 1 year and say, well, it wasn't good enough. You want to give that change time to bake. And so I think when you look at there are examples out there, right? You look at Pitt. Pitt was a team that in 2021 went 11-3 and won the ACC. Then they went 9-4, I think, and finished top 25 in the AP. Then they went 3-9, only won 2 FBS games. And then Pat Narduzzi went in there and said, look, man, I got to clean house. They fired their entire offensive staff. They went to the portal and they changed how they handled NIL. He basically reinvented the way they did things. And now they started 7-0. And of course, they've lost 3 games in a row, but 1 was to a hot SMU team. And 2 was, without their quarterback got knocked out in the UVA game. And then he didn't have him for Clemson. And they almost won both of those games. So I think the turnaround can happen really fast, right? If they get a good portal class. And I know everybody hates the portal. I get it. Like, for Florida State, because we got it wrong 1 year. But, Colorado is the hot commodity. That's a portal-built team. Indiana's a hot commodity. That's a portal-built team. You look at Lane Kiffin, a guy that I thought would, be a decent coach at Florida State if we were to fire Mike Norvell. The last 3 classes have not even been top 20 in the high school recruiting, but he's had top 2 portal classes 3 years in a row. And so I think you got to nail the portal this year. You have to see what we've seen from Mike Norvell the last few years when we crowned him the portal king. And then, like you said, George, I think that snowballs into the 2026 class. You got to see some kind of progression here because you have to start loading this roster with talent. Because the problem is, you don't know what's going to be available in the portal every year. We thought coming into this year that there was going to be a lot of things that were going to be available in the portal, and they just weren't there. You know as well as I do, offensive linemen and defensive linemen, not only are they hard to find in the portal, they are really expensive to get. So you have to find certain positions out of high school. There are certain positions. There will always be receivers. There will always be running backs and corners in the portal. But you got to start getting the recruiting there as well from the high school ranks at certain positions. Now, when you talk about the coordinators here, like I hope we get Brennan Marion from UNLV. I'm a big fan of his. I think the go-go offense would be successful in Tallahassee. I think it's a very dynamic offense. It stresses defenses in so many different ways. I think that would be an exciting show in Tallahassee there. It's got a lot of connections to Mike Norvell. That seems very likely. He also was part of some big recruiting wins during his time at Texas when he was there with Sarkisian for a short period. Defensive coordinator, I think you do need to get a proven guy. Like I would love a Will Muschamp type of hire. I don't know what you're going to get him because he's kind of living his best life in retirement there at Georgia being an analyst. But the thing is, like you mentioned, man, with the hot seat that he has, I think Mike Norvell needs to get it right, and it needs to happen fast. So you can't really take a lot of chances on this. Like you see where, the Pat Narduzzi, their offensive coordinator that he hired was a really great coordinator at Western Carolina from the FCS level. It worked out for them. Mike Norvell doesn't get that luxury. It has to work out or you're all going to be looking for a job in 2 years. And so I think I will at least say this. Mike Norvell made a ton of mistakes, and he had to deal with a situation that we all know has literally never happened in college football before, ever, with the playoff snub and the things that transpired after that. But I think he did learn a lot from this process, and I think that he is going to work tirelessly to get this right. I'm with you, George. I'm one game away from selling my stock on Mike Norvell. If they lose to Charleston Southern, we can throw the baby out with the bathwater at that point because I'm about tired of it. But the problem for me is I think if you were to fire Mike Norvell, you don't know what the next guy is going to do. And then you run the risk of becoming like a Nebraska, like a Miami, like a Florida, where you're firing coaches every 3 to 4 years and you never accomplish what you're going for. And so like nobody, George included, myself included, Mark, probably you too, nobody saw a 2-10 season after the season we had last year. Nobody. Even Nick Saban was wrong about this team. But like we said, you can also see the ceiling that is there that a lot of coaches, like for instance, say a Dave Dorn at NC State. The guy's by all intents and purposes, a pretty solid coach. He has a solid team every year. Still never won 10 games at NC State.
Not a comparison you want to your coach at FSU, that's for sure, but a fair one nonetheless.
Right, but you know what I'm saying? Like most places think he's a pretty solid coach. Never even won 10 games at that program. So I know the standards is different at Florida State than it is at NC State, but the point is, like, you saw Mike Norvell go from a dumpster fire that he inherited at Florida State to, frankly, one play away from putting Florida State in contention for the playoffs, possibly a national championship within 4 years. And so I think this thing can flip back the other direction. But I think the most important thing is this can only be a 1-year blip. This cannot carry on. You have to be, I think, 6 to 8 wins next year. And then you have to be in contention for the playoffs the year after that. But the problem also, I think why, and this is what me and George are actually probably going to talk a little bit about tomorrow, is how 2025 is one of the most crucial years in program history for Florida State. This is one of the most crucial off seasons for this program in history, because in 2026, you got to go to Alabama. You get Notre Dame. You got to travel to Miami. That 2026 schedule is doing you zero favors. So if you are not back up to a 7-8 win program in 2025, 2026 isn't going to get any easier. And by then you need to see the proof of why you're paying him $10 million a year.
I know Mark has a question. He's ready, but my one thing that I will say about that, kind of what I was trying to get to and what worries me about that is exactly what you just said. Like, it has to get turned around, and you've got to be able to go like recruit guys. You just simply don't have time to build up. Like, if you start 0-4 next year, it's over with. Like, so you said that they lost a little bit of, they got a little comfortable. And that's kind of what I saw too. They were desperate in the portal in 22. they were desperate in the portal in 23. And they went and got guys that, whether it was at a lower level or not, had 2, 3, 4 years of playing. And you knew that when you got them, they may not, we didn't know Jared Verse was going to be what he turned out to be. This player turned out to be, but we knew they could at least at a minimum level catch the football, actually,
Yeah.
make their assignments and stuff. So yeah, I'm right on point with you. I'm not throwing them out with the bathwater yet, but it's tough to see. And with the football only facility, with February coming up, where we find out if ESPN is going to extend things, I think you're right on the timeline. I think he gets 25 and probably 26 too. But you're going to have to immediately see the uptick. And you mentioned Colorado. You didn't mention Arizona State, who won 3 games 2 years in a row. All of a sudden, they're 8-2. Even SMU, I believe they're like 60% transfers as their starters, and they brought in another 30, 40 guys this year. So you ain't got to be great, but you got to make a damn bowl game next year. If you can make a bowl game next year, and then what I keep coming back to is you've got to get people who can recruit at an elite level, having a team that just wins 5 or 6 games. Because as good as we were in the portal, and it's something that I've harped on, you just named it. It's not like we had one portal class that changed everything. We literally had 6 portal classes worth of guys. We basically did with our portal recruiting what everybody else does in high school. We lost 2019. You look at Jordan Travis. 2020, when you look at Fabian Lovett, Jerry and Jones. 21, 22, Johnny Wilson, all those guys. You lost literally guys that stayed as transfers for 5, 4, 3, 2 years. And then you had Keon Coleman and Braden Fisk, who you also hit on. So, I'm not trying to be super, super negative. There are solutions out there, but